Hi again, everyone. This is the second to last lecture for the semester, and it concerns the portfolio and the guidelines for the completion of the portfolio. So I want you to watch this presentation, and then we will have a class on this on Thursday. You have to watch the presentation, otherwise the class will not make any sense. But in the class you can then ask questions about things that you are still uncertain about. These guidelines do not take the place of the guidelines on My UNISA. It's meant as additional information to that. Okay, we will look at the following things. In the first place, the question of what needs to be included. What do you have to have in your portfolio in order to get the maximum marks? The second thing we will be talking about is what must you absolutely do? What is absolutely necessary for you to do for the portfolio? And then the last thing is, what should you avoid? What should you not be doing? And we'll be looking at each of these in turn. Okay, what needs to be included in your portfolio? And this is really important. The first thing that you need to include are the portfolio assessments. Now, once again, this is now, I think, the third time that I'm saying this. There's a typing error in the portfolio itself. It reads, at the moment it says self-assessments. That's wrong. It should read portfolio assessments. The portfolio assessments, I will show you in a minute, but they're really important. They count 20 marks out of the 60. So it's a third. It's really important. Then the second thing that needs to be included is your answers to the article of Venter that we will also be dealing with in a little while. And then finally the honesty declaration, and that counts for 5 marks. So, because I take that rather seriously. Okay, so let's move on. Let's start with the portfolio assessments. The portfolio assessments can be found on My UNISA. If you look carefully there, under additional resources, there is a subheading that says portfolio assessments, and all the portfolio assessments are then included one after the other, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Each of them count 5 marks for your portfolio assessments, so it's important to do them all. If you don't do them all, you're throwing away marks, and I don't think anyone can afford that. Okay, the first portfolio assessment is an exercise in referencing and style, referencing and the required style of the College of Law. I include here the note that all portfolio assessments must be completed and then merged with a portfolio document. You can only submit one document. And please, you need to put them all in Word, in the same Word format, and then merge them. Then make them into a PDF. Otherwise, you mess up everything. Okay, then the content of the portfolio assessment 1 is, it's an example from something that a student submitted in a previous year. And you must now use the information you have under formal requirements and prescribed referencing to indicate the mistakes the student made on his or her submission. And we do this exercise both to basically force you to go and look at the formal requirements and the prescribed referencing, but also so that you can see what it is that your lecturers see when they have to deal with your documents, and how easy it is to make mistakes, and how if you proofread your own stuff, you can catch these mistakes and get more marks. Now, you can either make a list of the mistakes or indicate the mistakes on the document. Please, you need not mark the substantive content of the document. I mean, seriously. Only the formal aspects of it need to be marked. Okay, so I have an example here for you. You can do the indication of the mistakes in various ways. You can indicate the mistakes using Word's review function. So if you have this document open, at the top of your ribbon in Word, there will be a function called Review. And if you then, on Review, click on Track Changes, you can then indicate where you make changes to the document. And there's also a button that says Comment, and you can then add a comment. I will show you how this looks in real life in a minute. You can also, if you are not that electronically inclined, you can print out that assessment, indicate the mistakes in pen on it, then scan it in and include it in your final document. This is not an ideal way of doing it, because what often happens is if you scan something, it scans it as a picture. And if you scan something as a picture, we cannot mark it. It needs to be in character recognition. You can also make a list of the mistakes, and this is absolutely fine. You can just say, footnote 1, the book should have been referenced as follows. Footnote 2, or just say the footnote formatting is wrong. It should be in single spacing with the hanging indent of 1.5, that kind of thing. So, or whatever you want. You can literally indicate the mistakes in any way you like. As long as we can see that you understand what the student did wrong, then it's fine. Literally anything you want. Here is an example from a student, the student who did the best the previous semester. He used the markup function in Word, indicating mistakes with little comment boxes on the side. So he was actually really very specific about what the student should have done and shouldn't have done. And it's an indication that the student knew exactly what is required in referencing, and it's kind of impressive. So this is an example of how you can do it. As I said, you don't have to do it this way, but yeah. And the interesting thing is, when you now turn this Word document into a PDF, it will take your comments into the PDF. You don't have to worry about that. Okay, then portfolio assessment 2 is a fun one, I think. And that is, you have to, on a single sheet of paper, give a graphic representation of the various ideas in natural law. You can use any kind of graphic. It can be a mind map, it can be a flow chart, it can be little pictures. It doesn't matter. And once again, if here you want to draw me a picture and paint and whatever, you're welcome. Just one thing, it needs to fit into one page, a single sheet of paper. It cannot be endlessly going on and on and on. And once again, I have an example from the same student from the previous semester, and I am using his stuff with his permission. And for the previous semester, the question was focused on legal positivism. So this is what he did. This is his flow chart or graphic representation of the various ideas in legal positivism. So he gets all the different characteristics and the different debates, etc., etc. Okay. Portfolio assessment 3 has to do, is a very specific assessment, and that is that it tells you that if you go to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, which a lot of you have used in your assignment 1, and it's not a great source, by the way. No encyclopedia ever is, which is why we don't like Wikipedia. But you will see, if you search for African legal philosophy in the Stanford Encyclopedia, that there is nothing on it. So the portfolio assessment requires you to write something for the Stanford Encyclopedia and submit that as portfolio assessment 3. Now, please, you don't have to actually submit it to Stanford. You just have to write it in the style of Stanford. And they actually, if you go to their webpage, you will see here their editorial information, which includes the style. the way in which you must write for them, which is different from how you write for UNISA. So you look there, see what their policies are, etc., etc., and then you write in one page, just one page, you write a summary of African legal philosophy in an easily understandable format. People who use Stanford and Wikipedia and things like that are not into really heavy intellectual stuff. They just want the basic ideas. And that's what you must convey in that one page from Stanford. So that's what Portfolio Assessment 3 is. That's it. It's a summary of what you have in the study guide on African legal philosophy, but written in your own style and a very accessible style, so that ordinary people will understand it. And my tip for this is, give it to someone who hasn't studied law, your mother or your sister or whatever. Give it to them and ask them to please read it and say if it makes sense to them. Okay. Then, sorry, this was once again the same student. They had to do a Wikipedia article. And if you are familiar with Wikipedia, you will immediately recognize that the student got it spot on. It's exactly in the right style, and it is very impressive. I was really impressed with the student's work. But you must do the same thing, except you do it for Stanford. So it's the same exercise, and the purpose of the exercise is, okay, once again, to go through African legal philosophy, but also to see that there are different styles of referencing. You must always be able to adapt to the kind of style that is required of your context. It will be different in practice, but this is what you need to know. The context changes, then your style must change. Then Portfolio Assessment 4 is this one, and it fits on one page, and it must continue to fit on one page. I'm not interested here in you going into enormous amounts of detail as to what each of these mean. So you must, for example, briefly, and this literally can be done with bullets. This is the one time you're allowed to use bullets, to explain what is the essence of the skeptical approach in critical legal studies, the skeptical approach in critical race theory, and the skeptical approach in critical gender theory. And then do the same for the role of power, interdisciplinarity, and the interpretive turn. This is the simplest thing in the world ever. It basically requires you to summarize the whole of the critical theory section of your study guide into one page. And it is a really good skill to have, because if you have these kinds of summaries for every learning unit, then doing the assignments and doing the portfolio becomes easy. Okay. Now, next is the answers to the article, which is the bulk of the portfolio. And that is an article by Professor Francois Venter from Potchefstroom on the limits of transformation in South Africa's constitutional democracy. Now, I chose this article because it is not something that most people will be familiar with, but also because it links ideas in the current South African situation with on transformative constitutionalism with critical ideas and critical engagement with the ideas. We very seldom see critical engagement with something like constitutional democracy, or transformative constitutionalism. So this is a chance for you to see something a little bit more critical, if you wish. Now, when you look at the questions that's asked about the article, they will immediately be very familiar to you. You need to do three things. You must provide a summary explaining, not summarizing the whole article, but explaining what philosophical approach Venter is advocating and his reasons for that approach. It is, to my mind, a bit pointless to try and summarize his article. If you don't have that skill by now, you will never have it. But you have to read the article and then identify what his philosophical approach is and what is his reasons for this approach. And it's not obvious. You need to be very, very aware of what he's talking about. Then, and that's 10 marks and 300 words max. I am very strict about the 300 words. We will give you some leeway in the assignments as to the length. You can go over a bit, not in the portfolio. You need to learn how to write briefly. Then the second question is, using the information on this philosophy that you've identified in question 1, briefly explain whether you think his approach is valid. In other words, you are going to test what he says against what you know of the philosophy. Is it really the philosophy that he says is following? Or is it something else? Is it disguised as something else? Once again, 300 words max. Then the third one is where you can go to town. You can use any of the philosophies you have studied. And by any, I mean any. You can use whatever. Of course, it must be something in the study guide. And you provide your own response to this article. You can provide an alternative to the stated problem, agree with the author, or criticize his ideas, whatever you like, for 15 marks and 600 words max. So you need to engage with his idea and explain whether you agree with it or not, and why you disagree or agree with it, and what would be an alternative to what he is proposing. Now, for question 1 and 2, you need only the article and the study guide. Question 3 might require you to read a bit more, to go a bit further, to find more sources to explain the problem. So, the point is, your answer cannot exceed 1,200 words, or about 4 pages, and must be supplied with the footnotes and bibliography. But for purposes of the word count, the footnotes and the bibliography are not counted. And that's a very, very smart trick to use. You will see on the model answer I will post this morning for assignment 2, you can see how you can use that to your advantage. You can actually make your answer longer by using the footnotes smartly. Okay. Then, of course, there is the academic honesty declaration that you have to fill in. I do understand that there's now something on the submission portal where you have to click to say that this is your own work, and that's fine. You still need to add the honesty declaration, or you forfeit 5 marks. Sorry, you need to do it. Okay, what needs to be included? And I would suggest that you follow this sequence in your portfolio, but it's not cast in stone. You can mix and match and mix it up, that's fine. But you need to make sure in the first place there's a cover page. In the second place, a table of content. It's not that critical, but do it anyway. It just is more professional. Then the portfolio assessments, one after the other. Then the article and the answers. Of course, you're not going to include the whole article, just your answers to the article. Then the honesty declaration and your bibliography. That's what must be in your portfolio. Remember, one document. Don't embed things in it. Do the portfolio in Word, save it, and then print it as a PDF. I did a whole lecture on what you must do to get your document to us safely. Okay, so what is it that you must absolutely do? The kind of 5 commandments of legal philosophy. 1, stick to the word count. There is absolutely no reason to make this longer than you need to. The 4 pages is more than enough for you to answer the questions. You must absolutely include footnotes. If I get stuff without footnotes or with in-text referencing, or the Harvard method as they call it, I immediately know you've plagiarized. And then I take the trouble of finding out where you plagiarized from. In the third place, you must meet the formal requirements. Make sure your document is justified in Arial, size 12, the footnotes in size 10, single spacing, hanging indent, everything. Then fourth, I've already said this more than once, submit one document and one document only. And lastly, submit on time. You know by now, I can't give you an extension. You already have had numerous extensions this semester. Don't bargain on there being another one. Submit early, submit on time. Okay, what should you not do? Number one, don't plagiarize. It's so easy to pick up. And the day is going to come when you all will have to put your stuff through Turnitin before you submit it, so that you can yourself see how easy it is to see when you've plagiarized. In the same breath, do not copy from another student. That's really, it's so lazy. You need to do the work. It's a privilege to study. And if you aren't learning anything, then you're just wasting money. In the third place, don't buy your portfolio from a so-called tutor. These answers that you buy from these guys, number one, they are really, really poor. And if I had to mark it just as is, you wouldn't pass anyway. But now we pick it up. We pick it up very early on in the marking because it's just so obvious. And then you get 0. You get 0 for your exam. That's not something you want on your record. Then, okay, you should not leave out anything. Don't think, this one doesn't, it's only 5 marks. It's fine if I leave it out. Yeah, you might slip up on something else and lose out on an easy 5 marks. Don't leave anything out. Don't go over the word count. I've already talked about this. Folks, we have 2,000 students' portfolios to mark. If you go over the word count, it takes us more time. It's that simple. And then in the last place, don't submit a locked document or a document requiring a signature or a document in PDF-A or whatever. If you are unsure about how to do this, see my other lecture. The lecture is called How Not to Get a 0 for Legal Philosophy. But don't do anything daft that makes it impossible for us to mark your assignment and to get it onto the system. And that's it. Good luck with the portfolio. As I said, I will schedule a class where we can discuss this specifically, but for now, get to work. Time waits for no man, neither for women.